people who go back home and multiply themselves with their neighbors and friends, because without that, you know, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It's important just to pay some of our sympathies to those victims in Japan and the nuclear disaster, the kind of nuclear disaster that could happen here at Indian Point or Southern California. And with their enormous pain, they are sending us a message to close down these plants and usher an era of renewable and energy and solar energy. Secretary of Defense Robert Gates a few days ago spoke to the cadets at West Point, and he said, quote, "Any future Secretary of Defense who recommends that we have a land war in Asia or Africa ought to have his head examined." So the question is, why are we still in Afghanistan and Iraq? General Petraeus and General Jones said, over the last 2 years, of 50 Al-Qaeda, they estimate, in Afghanistan. Why are we blowing that country apart? Why are we sending our injured and sick back home day after day? Why are we killing so many Afghanis after 1 million Iraqis have died or more, and 5 million refugees and their country blown apart? A phenomena that a recent book just out, Erasing Iraq, called sociocide. It's because the people of this country don't have any influence on military and foreign policy. It's that the power is in the hands of the few against the many. The military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about in his farewell address is more powerful and concentrated than ever. And understand, in the draft in that address, he wanted to say the military-industrial congressional complex, a word that was dropped out. So it's important to move for new political movements. The two-party dictatorship is driving our country and its economy into the ground. If you look, for example, at what Bush has done that were considered unconstitutional and war crimes, consider the continuity, the seamless continuity with President Obama. Just look, the criminal wars and occupation continue in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq, now as under Bush. Extraordinary rendition, a fancy word for kidnapping and sending people without any charges to other regimes to be tortured. Still going on. Torture, still going on. Indefinite imprisonment, Guantanamo, is still going on. Surveillance of people in this country without judicial approval, is still going on. Again and again, what Bush did, Obama is doing with better rhetoric. That's why I call his government Obama Bush. The seamless transition. What we have to do here is talk to the American people about how these wars are boomeranging against us, the reason why so many budgets are cut, unemployment, lack of law enforcement against corporate criminals, because we're putting so much money into Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan and others. Now look how they look at us. There aren't any Al-Qaeda to speak of in Afghanistan. There are 25 to 30,000 Taliban fighters. They have no air force, no navy, no artillery, no tanks. They have Kalashnikovs and rocket-propelled grenades and suicide belts, and they're holding down the most powerful army in the history of the world, 100,000 American soldiers, 100,000 more contractors, all kinds of Afghani soldiers. How are they doing that? I mean, they're pretty cruel themselves. How are they doing that? Because they have a cause that says expel the invader. Expelling the invader will be forever the cause of everybody in the world who is invaded. And so we better pay attention to the way the Afghani people who are not fighting, just going around their daily lives. When those 9 boys were killed by a drone on March 1st, their families are going to hate America, and their relatives are going to hate America and want to fight America. When those wedding parties were blown up by this so sorry terrorism, helicopters, the same thing. We're boomeranging. We're creating enemies and fighters against us. So this is not a national security, it's just a reverse. It's creating hatred and violence all over the third world against the United States. And those militarists and those warmongers who are both Democrat and Republican are speaking on our behalf, and we must never let that happen. David Petraeus, General David Petraeus, he's seen here as a suave PhD doctorate from Princeton, immaculately dressed, very, very self-controlled in his presentations to Congress. We heard it all before in the Vietnam War. But overseas, he's seen in Afghanistan as the butcher of Afghanistan. We have to begin looking at the way these people who never fought against us are being torn apart. That country's being torn apart. Never mind the Taliban fighters. Those nighttime kill raids are seen as metastasizing terror by people who are in their homes. They don't know when it's coming and what's going to happen, and their children. And it's all secret, and there's no accountability. Now, what do we do about this? Let's look at this very clearly. Everything we want at this gathering, if we want the wars to end and the peace to come, it's got to go through those 535 men and women in Congress who put their shoes on every day like we do. Kucinich's resolution to get out of Afghanistan had over 90 members of the House. There's another 100 members of the House who are on the fence. They need a push. I mean, that's a pretty good start to begin with. And the Vietnam War was stopped not only by the protests and the demonstrations, which were critical to the climate, and the lawsuits, and the sit-ins, and the civil disobedience, etc. They were stopped because finally Congress cut off the money. That's what Congress can do for this one. So, now here we are. We've got budget cuts in Congress. People from Harlem to East LA are being cut in terms of food rations, in terms of health care and child care. Energy assistance to the poor in Appalachia and Maine are being cut. But what budget is not being cut because of the kind of organized citizen action that we have to learn from? The one budget that's going up is the U.S. foreign aid to the military, technological, and economic superpower called Israel that's suppressing, oppressing, brutalizing the Palestinian people. So, how is this being done? It's being done by organized citizen action of a certain persuasion in every congressional district, led by AIPAC. Every congressional district. There was a time when that lobby was very weak. There was a time when they couldn't get any press. They couldn't get their calls returned. Now, anything they put on the table in Congress, they get over 95% of the members of Congress. That is the kind of citizen action to learn from. How do they do it? First of all, they don't blow off steam unless it's focused laser-like on every member of Congress. They go personally to every member of Congress. They go to their offices back home, whose addresses are in your phone book. They go to the offices on Capitol Hill. They raise money for their campaigns. But the most important power is the power to absorb the time of members of Congress who say to AIPAC, we'll do whatever you want, just get off our back. We got other things to do. In other words, everything we do has got to focus on each senator and representative, their grown-up children, their brothers, their sisters, their grandparents, their friends, their business associates. They're all back home, and you can find out who they are. I can't emphasize enough that we can have massive rallies. There was one 200,000 some of you were at in 2003. If we do not take that energy and zero it in on each member of Congress, say, okay, where are you now? Where are you going? What's your decision? What are you going to do? Bring the soldiers who are coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq. Most of them are against these wars. There was a poll in January 2005 of soldiers in Iraq that the Pentagon did not challenge. Over 70% of the soldiers said in January 2005, we got to get out of Iraq in 6 to 12 months, including a majority of Marines. And you don't think they think that's true about Afghanistan? We got to get them speaking to the media. You have on your side a majority of the American people. You think the majority of the American people now, suffering unemployment, suffering cuts, want their tax dollars, want their sons and daughters to go blowing countries apart that don't threaten us? Of course not. So you have what Abraham Lincoln called the public sentiment. With the public sentiment, we can do anything. And that's what we have to organize. And so each and every one of you, if you haven't done it already, you go back and you get 10 people. You get your neighbors or friends and relatives, sit them down in the living room, and just connect with that general public sentiment, the energy to put that public opinion on a cutting-edge impression on the members of Congress. Let me just leave you with a couple last words. Cutting off the money is what Congress can do. You see, the executive branch, the imperial presidency, has a momentum of its own, and it can do whatever it wants until the money runs out. That's what you want to focus on. And now, with people desperate for services that are being cut, all kinds of health and safety programs are being cut, housing, education. You have the best possible climate to say, why are we spending today $700 million a day, right today, every day, on the Afghan war and the Iraq occupation? Now, we're going to do fundraising. What you should do, you've got to do this, and this was done in the civil rights movement, it was done in the abolition of slavery movement, the women's rights movement. They found some rich people to help them. It takes money to hire organizers, to pay for transportation. They've had some rich people. You've got to go back and just assume that at least 1% of the really rich people where you live, some of them veterans, are going to put some money in, but they're never asked, because they're just written off with the stereotype of rich people. And some of them in their elderly years have a different perspective on life, about their children and grandchildren, and something our founders called posterity. So try to raise the money. Now we're gonna have a little test right here. There's $10,000 right here that can be raised with those containers that are going around. Where is it? Containers that are going around. This is what you got to do when you go back home. You got to go back, because every rally should produce enough money to create another rally, and another rally, and another rally. That is, there's $10,000 in your pockets. I know that. I got some in my pocket, right here. Okay? So we're going to put it in here, and it's go all around, and then maybe before the rally's over or afterwards on the website, veteransforpeace.org, veteransforpeace.org, they'll tell you how much they raised. Let me tell you, Veterans for Peace and Iraq Veterans Against the War, they use that money efficiently. And that's what you've got to do. Pitch it in, and then get your neighbors and friends to do likewise. I look at this audience here, and I say, you're the vanguard. You showed up. You've been showing up. I see many of the same faces. Half of democracy is showing up, and say to the people back home when they say it's impossible, they're too powerful in Washington, you can't do anything about it. Cut away the rationalization of their futility with one question. Are you willing to do what you need to do as a citizen for peace against boomeranging, brutal wars that no one can stop you from doing? Nobody can stop them from rallying, from marching, from showing up, from mobilizing. And from that collaborative effort, everything follows. Focus on the members of Congress, raise the money. Every rally, every demonstration provides the resources to produce the next rally and demonstration. You have the majority of opinion behind you. You have soldiers coming back who will testify for you from bitter experience. And you have a Congress that has no backbone, but it has the space for you to insert that backbone. Thank you.